We're going to begin this morning on the East Coast, where Hurricane Erin is expected to bring dangerous conditions. Portions of the Outer Banks in North Carolina, they're on high alert for heavy wind and rain today as Hurricane Erin churns closer to the coast. Mandatory evacuation orders are in place in the area as a precaution.
The storm was downgraded to a Category 2 on Tuesday, and it is expected to move away from the U.S. in the coming days. But forecasters are still warning of life-threatening rip currents in coastal areas of the Atlantic. These dangerous swimming conditions are prompting beach closures and advisories up and down the East Coast. Officials from New England to Florida are encouraging people to stay out of the water. Meteorologist Angie Lassman is standing by. We begin with NBC News national correspondent Erin Gilchrist, who's in North Carolina with the latest. Erin, good morning.
North Carolina's Outer Banks do expect to see tropical storm conditions before the sun goes down today. It's what people here have been preparing for the last several days. We know that evacuation orders have already been executed, really, as you look at Hatteras Island and Ocracoke Island along the Outer Banks here. And the expectation is that the waves you see behind me will continue to increase in ferocity and increase in size as the day goes on into tonight, when we also expect to see some rainfall, and into tomorrow as well. We know that the storm surge expectation is about 2 to 4 feet in this area. There's also a risk of coastal flooding really extending from South Florida all the way up to the Boston area. So any parts of the eastern seaboard can expect to see much more wave action and potentially flooding, more so than they might expect under these sorts of conditions, when we know that this large hurricane is still far out to sea. It's 400 or so miles plus maybe from the North Carolina coast at this point, but it's going to get a little bit closer, and that's when we expect to see potentially waves that could reach 15 or 20 feet in height. The warning for everybody is to stay away from the water, not just to stay out of the water as you look at all these different places along the East Coast. The advisory is to just stay away from the water because it could push onto beaches or oceanfront property very quickly, and officials here are warning folks not to get too close and put their lives at risk. They've also warned people to, as early as possible, check their property to make sure that things are secured for any water that may come farther inland. Those are the warnings set out right now. We know there are people on Hatteras Island here in North Carolina who've chosen to stay and ride out the storm. If the major highway there does wash out, some of those people are likely to be stuck potentially for several days. The folks we spoke to said they're ready to ride out the storm under those conditions. Again, dangerous rip currents expected all up and down the eastern seaboard, and the advisory for everyone on the East Coast is to stay away from the beaches as much as possible. Back to you.
All right, Erin, thank you. Let's bring in meteorologist Angie Lassman.
Yeah, she's back with us, and she is keeping a close eye on Hurricane Erin's path. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Yes, we still have Category 2 Erin, and we're still going to continue to feel those impacts along the eastern coast, the indirect impacts. The system right now, 100 miles per hour, still just over 450 miles to the south-southeast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. It's moving northwest at 13 miles per hour, and we are expecting that northerly track to continue here in the coming days and kind of maintain that Category 2 strength. And even still, with it sitting so far offshore, it's still going to have those indirect impacts. And we're talking about specifically the coastal flooding concerns, the storm surge, the potential for impressive wave heights, all of that on top of rip currents as well. So here's the alerts that we have right now when it comes to coastal flooding. Notice Seaside Heights, Wildwood, stretching down to Virginia Beach and points south from across parts of the Carolinas. We have the potential to see 2 to 4 feet of inundation, and we're likely going to see some roads washed over, maybe some damage to the beaches due to erosion. But this is all going to be ongoing over the next couple of days. And on top of that, notice some of the minor to major flooding that's already occurring across these areas. Where you see that bright pink, that's major flooding. So we're going to see that extensive flooding likely for the Atlantic and Chesapeake Bay. This is going to be something, again, for the next couple of days. Here's how those wave heights track over the next couple of days. Notice how far offshore this system is, but still 10 to 15 feet waves, up to 20 feet in some spots. The worst of it is going to remain, of course, closer to the center, but it's going to be so expansive here over the next day or so that we'll see those impacts closer to the coast. And on top of that, that high risk of rip currents, again, the impassable roads because of overwash and beach erosion will be something that you'll see if you live up and down the East Coast. There's the storm surge that we're expecting, like 2 to 4 feet likely for Cape Hatteras. And then the farther north you go up into Virginia Beach, about 1 to 3 feet. Same thing the farther south you go, Myrtle Beach, Wrightsville Beach included in that. One thing to know, we do have an expanding wind field with this system. So right now, about 440 miles across. As we get through the day today and it gets really just offshore of the Carolinas, we're going to see that tropical storm force wind field expand, and we're talking more than 500 miles across. So that means that we likely will see those tropical storm force winds for folks in that region, the Carolinas, included Cape Hatteras. You could see a peak wind gust of 53 miles per hour. And this is today and tomorrow, guys. We'll start to see things kind of improving beyond that. But in the meantime, the next couple of days, we'll see the storm surge, the wind, the high waves, all of it, really the coastal impacts that are impacting coast there.
It seems to be taking its time.
Taking its time for sure. Moving still northerly. We're still expecting, not a direct impact, but those indirect impacts are expansive.
All right. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you. Well, now let's get to some other big news this morning. NBC News understands that the Trump administration is weighing possible locations for face-to-face peace talks between Russian President Putin and Ukraine's President Zelensky. That is after the White House said the Russian leader had agreed to meet with his Ukrainian counterpart as part of an effort to end the war. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now. Garrett, good morning. So what are we learning about the potential locations for this meeting? And why does the president want to sit out the first summit and only join a subsequent session, we understand?
Well, Savannah, the president believes that ultimately this war's end is going to have to be negotiated by Presidents Zelensky and Putin. He sees himself as someone who could perhaps help that process along, but if he's not necessary, better to just stay out of the room. Where that room is, though, is very much an open question, an issue complicated in part by the fact that the International Criminal Court has an arrest warrant out for Vladimir Putin, which would require its member states to arrest him on site if he lands. That takes a good portion of the countries of the globe off the table, as it were, for a meeting. Our reporting right now is centering on two countries. One is Switzerland, which, historically neutral. They could vote to sort of absent themselves from that ICC ruling. The other is Hungary, who is a NATO member, but their leader, Viktor Orban, is considered to be more Russia-friendly than a lot of other countries in the world. He suggested that he could be amenable to hosting that meeting. We'll all be watching it closely.
Garrett, it's also clear that the president wants to move fast on this. But, I mean, given some of the complications you just mentioned, even about location, and then more generally, how quickly do you think Moscow is prepared to move? What are we hearing from the Kremlin?
Yeah, the Kremlin has shown no such sense of urgency here, Savannah. The Kremlin spokesperson only saying that if there are going to be leader-to-leader meetings, they have to happen through all the proper protocols. They take time. They take build-up. The kind of thing that you didn't see happen on the leader-to-leader meeting that was held just last Friday in Alaska. In fact, we've only heard about this willingness that Putin allegedly has to sit down with Zelensky from American officials, not from the Kremlin itself. So I would continue to look at the prospect of this bilateral meeting between Putin and Zelensky with skepticism.
Garrett, one of the big sticking points here for this peace deal, security guarantees for Ukraine. The president said in that Oval Office meeting with President Zelensky that the U.S. would be prepared to provide some type of support for Ukraine. It looks, though, like we mentioned earlier, boots on the ground won't be part of that, right?
That's the current thinking, Savannah, but this has changed several times in the past couple of days. The president at first dismissing questions about whether boots on the ground would be required, then saying he wouldn't want to do it, then the press secretary yesterday being much more definitive. Here's what Caroline Levitt said.
The president understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends in Europe and also to continue to cooperate and discuss these matters with Ukraine and Russia as well. I won't certainly rule out anything as far as military options that the president has at his disposal. I'll let him do that. I can tell you he's definitively ruled out boots on the ground.
Savannah, part of the challenge with all this is boots on the ground sort of sounds like it's such a vague term. Does that involve American air support? Well, what happens if an American pilot gets shot down? Does it involve American technology? Who's staffing that technology? And what would the American commitment be if a French peacekeeper, let's say, gets killed in Ukraine? These are highly technical questions that are going to take some time to work out.
All right, Garrett Haake, a lot unfolding here. Thank you very much.
The Trump administration is preparing to send warships to the Caribbean in an attempt to deal with drug trafficking.
And it comes as tensions rise with Venezuela. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more on this story.
The Trump administration is cracking down on drug cartels at sea. A source briefed on the matter tells NBC News the U.S. is planning to deploy these 3 warships near Venezuela. President Trump focusing on drugs coming to the coasts after reducing illegal border crossings to record lows.
They continue to send drugs into our country. Venezuela, they've been very nasty.
The Trump administration also recently doubling to $50 million its reward for the arrest of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, saying he violated U.S. drug laws. Meanwhile, in the fight against traffickers, the Coast Guard says it intercepted more than $138 million worth of drugs in the Caribbean this summer. Earlier this year, the president designated several cartels, as well as the notorious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, as foreign terrorist organizations. And despite pulling off a large-scale prisoner swap with Venezuela last month, President Trump has been increasingly at odds with Maduro.
He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice. The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel.
Now, the Venezuelan government has banned drone flights throughout the country amid what it considers a threat from the U.S. A U.S. official tells NBC News the warships will be used for intelligence gathering and surveillance in international waters. Still, Maduro just announced that he's mobilizing militia members across his country in response.
All right, Gabe, thank you.
As the federal takeover of law enforcement continues in the nation's capital, the Justice Department is now investigating whether police in Washington manipulated data to make crime rates appear lower. That's according to two senior law enforcement officials who spoke to NBC News. In May, a commander at the Metropolitan Police Department was suspended amid allegations he altered that data. He denies those claims. President Trump referenced the investigation in a Truth Social post earlier this week, saying, quote, D.C. gave fake crime numbers in order to create a false illusion of safety, adding they are under serious investigation. NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach joins us now from Washington. So, Gary, the president claimed D.C. was the most unsafe city in the U.S. and perhaps the world before he deployed the National Guard there. The city's mayor pointed to these statistics, which suggested crime in the capital was already at a 30-year low. Do we know who's telling the truth in light of this new development?
Well, first off, D.C. is not the most unsafe city in the U.S. If you look at the FBI crime data, Toledo, Cleveland, Memphis, and Little Rock all have more crime per capita than D.C. But D.C., of course, is a major American city, and of course, there is crime, and it has been going down over the past several years. Now, this crime data incident was first reported by our friends here at NBC Washington, and it involves a police district commander. There's 7 police districts across the city. One of the commanders in one of those districts is being accused of manipulating crime within that district. So this is not an across-the-board kind of thing. It's a very specified, specific incident. He was placed on paid leave, and there was an internal investigation happening at MPD before this DOJ investigation was announced. Joe?
Well, let's talk about what we know about who's running this investigation. What are they going to be looking at? Could this lead to any charges?
So this is being run out of the U.S. Attorney's Office here in D.C., who was run by former Fox News host Jeanine Pirro, a friend of President Trump's. This is going to be a more wide-ranging investigation. I think it's going to look at a lot of the individuals that are at top of Metropolitan Police Department, including Chief Pamela Smith, and to see what the data looks like across the board, even though this incident was very specific and targeted. It's going to have an opportunity to look all across the board, and there's no specified charges that are apparent yet.
Let's take a look. The White House has been touting more than 450 arrests since we saw this federal crackdown begin nearly 2 weeks ago. It's early, but what do we know about the impact this operation is having on crime and just also the impact it's having on regular folks living in D.C.?
Yeah, it is early, so I do want to stress that. But we looked at the data the week before the takeover started and then the week after the takeover had begun. And crime is down about 10%, both violent crime and property crime. So that is an interesting data point, and we'll continue tracking this as we get further and further on in this 30-day period. But in terms of how D.C. residents are feeling about it, they are upset that there are federal agents across the city in their neighborhoods. I want to show you some of this video that was shot last night by our folks here at NBC News. And this is a scene in the Columbia Heights neighborhood where members of the HSI, Park Police, and other federal law enforcement agencies were patrolling the residential area, and they were literally chased out of the area from their patrols by this crowd of peaceful but loud people. And I think this is the kind of thing that we're seeing across the city when these groups of HSI, which is part of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, get into these neighborhoods, this is the reaction from the residents.
And Gary, the arrest numbers, it can be hard to gauge what they say about what's happening in D.C. since the National Guard took over, right? Because we don't know if it's an accurate reflection of how many arrests are being made under normal crime in D.C. or whether this enlarged presence, this federal presence, is actually deterring crime, right?
And also who is arresting and what the charges are, I think, is also an important point here. The White House has been releasing stats every day. I think we're up to more than 400 arrests. About 40% of those are immigration related. And those numbers, the immigration numbers, are not at all involved in the MPD stats that we've been looking at. So there is a little bit of caveats there for sure. But there is a focus on immigration here in Washington by the White House and by federal officials. That's something that MPD has not been focusing on. Joe.
Gary, thank you so much.
Well, new video shows a dramatic building explosion in Wilmington, North Carolina that sent black smoke and debris soaring into the sky yesterday. Several firefighters were injured in the incident. Officials later arrested a man in connection to the explosion for allegedly driving a car into a gas line. Here's NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson with more.
Oh my God! This dramatic video shows the moment a gas line exploded along a busy Wilmington, North Carolina road. Police say firefighters seen here were responding to a gas leak at a veterinary hospital when this gas line blew up. Debris blasted hundreds of feet in the air, along with a ball of flames and these massive plumes of black smoke. Ian Cross filmed this video.
What did it feel like when that explosion went off?
I mean, it takes your breath away. Everything starts to kind of be like slow motion almost. You look up and you're seeing just debris on fire, like coming down on you.
No civilians were inside the hospital, which hadn't opened to the public yet. 3 firefighters were injured, officials say, one with severe burns on his hands and arms.
A vehicle that went off the road behind us here and struck the gas lines feeding the building that ultimately exploded. When officers arrived, the vehicle was gone.
That driver now charged with felony DWI and leaving the scene of a hit and run.
There was evidence that would lead one to believe that the driver was impaired.
The destruction seen here from above, as officials say the scene is secure. Breathing a sigh of relief after no lives were lost in this terrifying explosion. Priscilla Thompson, NBC News.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.